When a Ukrainian child asks Zelensky a heartfelt question, he stares in disbelief, then delivers a response so powerful it will break your heart. The local primary school in Kyiv buzzed with energy as children enjoyed their break, soaking in the joy of a top-tier education. But in an instant, the carefree chatter turned into an unexpected lesson, delivered by none other than Zelensky himself. Dressed in his signature sporty attire, the same one that made headlines in the White House, he wasn't making a fashion statement. He was sending a message to the world. Ukraine is standing strong, unshaken by any attack. Then he arrived. No sirens, no heavy security, just Zelensky and his advisors. Stepping into the school, he was greeted by the principal, whose excitement was undeniable. As he took in his surroundings, he shared his first impression. "This feels like an uprising," he remarked. His mission was clear: to instill courage in the young minds that would shape Ukraine's future. He believed that investing in education meant investing in the nation's strength. After a brief conversation in the office, the principal extended an invitation to visit a classroom, a gesture Zelensky welcomed with an open heart. As Zelensky stepped into the classroom, he saw rows of young students seated neatly, waiting for someone important. But something felt off. Some children looked bored, others seemed unsure why they were even there. Sensing this, Zelensky turned to the principal and said, "You didn't have to force them to be here." The principal lowered his gaze, a hint of embarrassment in his eyes. But Zelensky had already made his decision. He was going in anyway. With a warm, energetic tone, he greeted them, "Hello, young minds." Zelensky smiled as the children responded to his greeting, but their voices carried a weight far beyond their years. He scanned the room and noticed something striking. They all shared the same expression: fear. Sensing the heaviness in the air, he knew he had to lift their spirits. With a playful grin, he quipped, "You know, when I was your age, I was most afraid of math tests, but I see some of you might be even braver than me." A few chuckles rippled through the room, breaking the tension. But then, a small voice cut through the laughter. A boy, no older than 8, raised his hand and asked, with innocent curiosity, "Do you ever get scared?" The room fell silent. Zelensky's smile faltered for just a moment. The question hit him harder than he expected. Fear. It was something he had pushed aside countless times, something he had no choice but to hide. Yet, here was a child, looking up at him with wide, unblinking eyes, asking him to be honest. For a brief moment, he wrestled with the truth. Should he reassure them with words of bravery, or should he tell them what no leader dares to admit? For a moment, Zelensky felt the weight of the war pressing down on him. That simple question, "Do you ever get scared?" had cracked something deep inside. His mind flickered through the past 2 years. The sleepless nights, the relentless bombings, the desperate calls for aid, the images of cities reduced to rubble. He thought of the families torn apart, the soldiers who never made it home, the children, just like these, who had lost everything. He looked around the room. Every pair of eyes was locked onto him, waiting, searching for reassurance. These weren't just school children. They were witnesses to a war they never asked for. They had heard the sirens, felt the ground shake, seen the fear in their parents' eyes, and now they wanted to know if their leader, their symbol of strength, felt it too. Zelensky took a slow breath. His usual quick wit and charm wouldn't be enough here. He had to be real. He let the silence stretch for a moment, collecting his thoughts. Then, with a softer voice, he spoke. "I want to tell you a story," he said, his voice softer now, carrying a gentleness rarely heard in his speeches. There was no podium, no cameras, Just him and the expectant faces of children who had already seen too much of war. The room seemed to shrink, the outside noise fading into the background. The air felt heavier, charged with quiet anticipation. The children leaned in, their wide eyes reflecting a mix of curiosity and something deeper. Hope, maybe. Even the teachers standing at the back, who had seen and heard so much over the past months, found themselves unusually still, sensing that something profound was about to unfold. Zelensky exhaled, running a hand through his slightly unkempt hair. His expression shifted. His usual determined gaze softened, replaced by something more vulnerable. A flicker of memory passed through his eyes, something distant yet still raw. "This isn't something I often talk about," he admitted, his voice steady but laced with emotion. A hush fell over the room. The children, once restless, were now utterly focused on him. Even the smallest among them, those who barely understood the weight of war, felt the shift in energy. This wasn't just a lesson. This was something real. Zelensky's gaze swept across the room before settling back on the boy. He took a slow breath. "Before I was president, before politics, I was just a boy like you, with dreams, with fear." He paused, his voice quieter now. "And there was one night I will never forget." The room fell completely still. Even the faint hum of the outside world seemed to disappear. A soft breeze slipped through a cracked window, making the curtains shudder. Somewhere in the distance, a car horn blurred and faded. The children didn't move. The teachers barely breathed. Zelensky's eyes darkened, lost for a moment in the past. Zelensky's eyes seemed to cloud over, lost in a memory long buried but never forgotten. His voice dropped lower, pulling the children deeper into the moment. "I was about your age when I got lost in a forest," he said, his tone carrying the quiet weight of something deeply personal. The children stilled. Even those who had been fidgeting moments ago sat frozen, their wide eyes locked onto him. The teachers at the back exchanged glances, but said nothing. No one wanted to break the spell settling over the room. Zelensky took a slow breath, his fingers pressing lightly against his knee, as if grounding himself in the present. "My family had gone on a trip," he continued, his voice distant, as if he were speaking not to them, but to the boy he once was. "I was running ahead, playing, chasing fireflies." A soft smile flickered across his face, barely there before fading. His gaze darkened. "And then I stopped." The room seemed to shrink around them. Even the air felt heavier. A gust of wind rattled the window, making the curtain billow like a ghostly figure. I turned around, and suddenly everything was different. His fingers twitched, as if remembering the sensation of tree bark beneath his palm. The trees, tall, endless, stretched in every direction. No path, no way out. A few children swallowed hard. One clutched his desk, his knuckles turning white. I called out. Zelensky's voice barely rose above a whisper. But no one answered. A hush wrapped around the room. The children weren't just listening anymore. They were there, lost in that forest with him, feeling the creeping dread of a boy alone in the dark. A few children gasped. Others exchanged nervous glances as if picturing themselves in the same situation. Zelensky allowed a small, nostalgic smile, but there was a shadow behind it, a flicker of something deeper. His eyes drifted for a moment, as if he could still see the towering trees, the creeping darkness. "In that moment, I was terrified," he admitted, his voice quieter now, almost confessional. The children barely blinked. Even the restless ones who had been shifting in their seats earlier sat perfectly still. The room seemed to close in, as if drawn into the depths of that long-ago forest. Zelensky exhaled slowly, rubbing his thumb against his fingertips. My heart was pounding, my legs frozen. His voice carried the weight of a child's helplessness, raw and unguarded. I thought, what if I never find my way back? What if no one finds me? He paused, the memory wrapped around him, tangible, almost alive. A chair creaked softly. Someone in the back shifted, but no one spoke. The children hung on his every word, their faces tight with anticipation. Even the principal, who had been standing near the doorway with his hands clasped anxiously, now seemed lost in the story, his earlier nervousness forgotten. Zelensky's voice softened, almost a whisper now, yet it carried the weight of something profound. But then, I remembered something my father once told me. He let the moment stretch, his gaze sweeping over the room before settling back on the boy. The tension in the air was thick, as if even the walls were listening. "Fear is like the night," he said, his voice steady. "It only wins if you close your eyes." A flicker of understanding passed through the children's faces. Some glanced at each other, while others simply stared, absorbing every word. Zelensky leaned forward slightly, his expression serious yet warm. "So," I took a deep breath. His fingers curled slightly, as if gripping an invisible thread of courage. I calmed myself, and then I started walking. He let the words hang in the air, their weight settling in. One step at a time. He nodded slightly as if reassuring them. Even though I was scared, I didn't let it stop me. The room held its breath. Every child, every teacher, even the principal was caught in the moment. Then, just as the anticipation reached its peak, Zelensky's lips curved into a small smile. "And you know what?" The pause was deliberate. The silence was electric. Finally, he answered. "I found my way back." The classroom exhaled as if they had all been holding their breath. A few students nodded, their young faces carrying an understanding beyond their years. It wasn't just a story, it was something more. A lesson woven into the words, something they could carry with them long after this moment had passed. Zelensky's expression shifted, the warmth in his eyes now mixed with something heavier. "That was the first time I learned the truth about fear," he said. "It isn't something we can run from." His gaze swept across the room. "It will find us, in the dark, in the quiet, in the moments we least expect." A shiver passed through the room, not from cold, but from the weight of his words. He straightened slightly. "But what matters is what we do next." The young boy who had asked the question sat perfectly still, his small fingers gripping the edge of his desk. Zelensky noticed. Slowly, he reached out, resting a firm but gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "Even now, as president, I feel fear." This wasn't a speech. It wasn't politics. It was a man speaking his truth. "When the first missiles struck our cities, I felt it." The room remained silent. "When I had to send our soldiers into battle, I felt it." A shadow crossed his face, and when I see children like you, living through war instead of playing outside, his fingers curled slightly on the boy's shoulder. "I feel it." The weight of his words settled over the room. Some of the children lowered their heads. Others stared at him, wide-eyed, as if they had never considered that someone as powerful as a president could feel fear too. "But," he continued, his voice steady now, "I do not let fear decide who I am, and neither should you." Zelensky looked around the room, his gaze steady, meeting the eyes of each child. Their faces were young, but their eyes carried something far beyond their years: uncertainty, worry, and a silent question that had no easy answer. He took a slow breath before speaking. "You are the future of Ukraine." His voice was firm yet gentle, and the future is never built by those who give in to fear. The room was still. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. It is built by those who choose to stand up. He let the words settle. Even when they are afraid. For a moment, no one moved. Then, from the front row, a small hand lifted hesitantly. A girl, no older than 7 or 8, tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She looked at him with wide, uncertain eyes. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "But how do we do that?" she asked. She swallowed, then added, "How do we be brave?" The question was so simple, yet it carried the weight of a nation. Zelensky's smile was gentle, understanding. He nodded, letting the girl's question settle in the air. "Bravery isn't something you wake up with," he said. "It's something you practice." His gaze swept the room, his tone calm but certain. It's speaking up when you want to stay silent. He let the words linger. Helping when others walk away. A flicker of recognition crossed some of the children's faces. Believing in yourself, even when no one else does. He stood up, walking slowly to the front of the room. His presence filled the space not with authority, but with understanding. Every great person in history, every hero, every leader, every scientist, every artist, they all felt fear, but they didn't let it stop them, and neither will we. A murmur spread through the classroom. The air felt different now, lighter, charged with something new. Hope. Zelensky turned back to the young boy. "So, to answer your question, yes, I get scared, but I will never let fear decide my fate, and I hope you won't either." The boy nodded, his lips pressed together in determination. Then, something unexpected happened. One by one, the children began clapping. First, a few hesitant hands, then the entire room erupted in applause. The teachers joined in, the principal wiped his eyes discreetly, and for a moment, in that small classroom in Kyiv, the weight of war seemed a little lighter. Zelensky chuckled, raising a hand to quiet them down. All right," he said, his familiar humor returning. "Before I go, does anyone have a question that doesn't make me reflect on my deepest fears?" A quiet warmth settled over the room, the laughter still lingering in the air. The children sat a little straighter, their eyes a little brighter. Zelensky took one last look at them, knowing this moment would stay with him just as much as it would with them. With a small knowing smile, he rose to his feet. "You are never alone," he said, his voice steady yet soft. And as he turned to leave, the classroom didn't just watch him go. They carried his words with them. If this story moved you, the next one will stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Click the video on your screen to experience another powerful tale, one that will challenge, inspire, and shift your perspective. Your next journey is just a click away. So,